Before the video actually begins, I want to apologize for the bad voiceover because I'm too busy to go redo it, and I wanted to get this video out as soon as possible, so once again I apologize. So recently I got into an argument with somebody on a server I go on to frequently about Majora's Mask 3D and if it is bad or not. And all he did was just post a link of Nerrel's video and just quote what he said. This is stupid because of how horrible the video is, and it makes sense to criticize the video since it is what most people point to when they say the remake was bad. But the hypothetical audience member might say, because let's get real here, no one will watch this video. What makes the video so bad? Well, it leaves out a lot of good changes the remake does, which I will get to in a bit, and over-exaggerates a lot of the others. But before we begin, I want to say that if you like Majora's Mask 64 over Majora 3D, that is fine. There is nothing wrong with that. And I'm not trying to prove you wrong for liking it. What I am trying to do is defend the remake from the most popular video that bashes it and criticize the video for being awful. And also criticize Nerrel for making said bad video. So I don't have a 3DS capture card, so I apologize for the 3DS footage looking bad. Now that the video is actually beginning, the first thing I'm going to talk about are the good changes the remake does that he doesn't mention. Number 1, the controls are smoother. This is self-explanatory. Controlling Link is smoother and better than it was in the N64 version. And before you post your angry comment, no, it's not just the Virtual Console having input lag. The AVGN made a video of Majora 64, and he criticizes the controls on real hardware, so shut up. 2, the aiming controls are leagues and bounds better than the N64 version. Again, self-explanatory. The gyro aiming just feels smoother and better than aiming on the N64. And again, no, it's still not the Virtual Console. The AVGN also mentioned this on real hardware, so shut up. 3, the option for dual analog camera control. Again, this is self-explanatory. You can use the Circle Pad Pro second analog stick or the new 3DS's to control the camera, which is a pretty big change because now you no longer need to use the L button for camera control, and using it feels surprisingly good given this game wasn't originally designed with it. And the best part is that if you don't want to use it, you don't have to because it's totally optional. 4, the Goron form punches faster. In the original, he punched really slowly. In the remake, they sped that up, so it's easier to actually hit things. 5, you have 4 item slots, and the ocarina has its own slot on the bottom left of the touchscreen. I'm bringing this up now because it will be relevant when we talk about what he considers to be the water temple of this game. There is one more change I will say for the end because of how big it is, so if you're wondering why I didn't mention it, I will. Now, these are all big changes and pretty good ones too. So that calls into question, why didn't he mention these in his review/comparison? My guess is that he just wants to make the remake look as bad as possible instead of being like Donkey, a good critic. But let's move on to the next part of the video. That being the stuff he over-exaggerates in the video. Number 1, the bombers. This is a prime example of what I mean when I say he over-exaggerates. All they change in the remake is that they run up to you. That's it. They don't force you to talk to them when they run up to you. You can just ignore them. Problem solved. Now, if they did force you to talk to them every time they ran up to you, then he would be right to be annoyed. But they don't, so, Oh, and for those certain cutscenes you can't see without them getting into your face, there's only one of them, and it's a comedic cutscene where you're dancing, so it ironically makes the bomber look like he's actually part of the cutscene, because he kind of looks like an audience member now, so. 2, the graphics. He says, and I quote, "The game looks too gorgeous," referring to Clocktown looking too clean. There are 2 big reasons as to why this criticism is stupid. 1, if Clocktown looks too clean, just say Clocktown looks too clean in the first place. Don't say the entire game does this if you later say this one area has this problem. Saying the entire game looks too gorgeous makes you sound desperate for actual criticism. 2, you only provide examples for the stock Pod Inn, not all of Clocktown, so it makes it seem like this one tiny building has this problem, not the entire area. 3, the Zora swimming. While I agree that they should have kept the swimming speed from the N64 version default and have it not use magic, he acts like you can't fix this. If you use the Chateau Romani, then you get infinite magic power for the remainder of the 3-day cycle. And since the N64 speed needs magic to use now, you will get permanent N64 speed for the remainder of the 3-day cycle. Sure, it should have just been that way by default, but the fact that you can change it back means it's nowhere near as bad as he makes it out to be. 4. Saving the game. I agree that they should have kept the option of saving using the Song of Time, but he acts like it is the definitive way of playing the game. It's not that for one reason I will get to, but if you really want to save at the start of the 3-day cycle, there's literally a statue where you can save your game that is close to where you spawn at the beginning of the 3-day cycle. So that criticism is also overblown. 5. The Bomber's Notebook. He acts like the new notification you get in the remake is a huge problem, but it's like 3 seconds long. It's not that bad. There was something much worse in the N64 version that the 3DS version fixed that also involved waiting that he didn't cover. And trust me, I'm gonna get to that. 6. Deku Link's Walking Star. Sure, they should have left it the way it was, but it's not a big deal because this is the form you will use the least, and you won't use it much outside of the swamp. And the times you will use him outside the swamp, it will be for his flower thing, where this doesn't come into play. Also, his bubble shoots straighter and has a reticle, which actually makes him more useful, since now he can hit things with this bubble, meaning if you run out of arrows and need to hit something, then you can use this. 7. The difficulty. When people like Nerrel say that the 3DS version is way easier, they try to imply that Majora's Mask 64 was a hard game. It's really not. It just has a bunch of beginner's traps. And once you learn about them, then the rest of the game will be a cakewalk. Also, it really isn't that drastically easier than the N64 version, given that I jumped in the N64 version with no problems after playing the 3DS version first. Which you wouldn't expect with the 3DS version, which is dramatically easier like Nerrel says. 8. The Stone Tower Climb. Oh boy, is this one where he drops the ball. He makes the claim that the 3DS version did nothing to improve on this section, and that it's the water temple of Majora's Mask. This is stupid because in the original you had 3 items, and needed 4 items, including the Ocarina, the Goron's Mask, the Zora Mask, and the Hookshot. This means you had to pause the game, swap out the Ocarina for the Hookshot when you needed to grapple, and then get the Ocarina back out when you needed to play the Elegy of Emptiness. Since the remake has 4 slots, and the Ocarina no longer takes up an item slot, this means as long as you have the 2 masks and the Hookshot, you don't need to pause the game and sort your items anymore. So this section actually does go by quicker on 3DS. Also, they changed it to where you no longer need to play the Elegy of Emptiness to flip the dungeon over, so that's another thing that was improved in this section. Sure, they should have a button that repeats the last song you played, so that cuts down on playing the Elegy of Emptiness, but this is way better than the N64 version due to cutting down on item management. Now for the last change he missed, and oh boy is it a big one. The Song of Double Time. In the original, this only skipped you to 6 AM or 6 PM to remove a bit of the waiting. While nice to have, it wasn't enough and you still ended up waiting around too much since a lot of quest events happen in the same time period, like Kei's mask at like 10, and Andrew getting his letter at round 2, not from day to night. Let's take the couples mask side quest for example. If you want to 100% this game, you have to play it twice, and even if you use the Song of Double Time as much as you can get away with, you still have to wait a total of 35 minutes. And no, I wasn't using the inverted Song of Time. Do I need to explain why sitting around doing nothing for 35 minutes is objectively bad design? And don't just say go do something in between, because this side quest is only completable by the time you get to Icona, and by that time most people will have completed most of the side quests, so there really isn't anything to do in between events. And no, just because it's optional doesn't excuse it from criticism, because 1, bad design is still bad design, and 2, because if you want to get your money's worth and complete the N64 version, you have to sit through all of that. And that isn't even the only side quest where you have to sit there and wait. The Romani's Branch side quest, you have to wait for the ghost to show up. Kamaro's Mask, you have to wait for him to show up. Nerrel even uses the side quest as a reason why the original save system is better than the newer one, saying that whenever the game is getting boring, another cycle will begin. Which is false, because most players will get bored while waiting during the quest and will want to fast forward things. This is why changing the Song of Double Time to where it can skip you to any hour you haven't experienced in the current cycle is so good. You can just skip to when the next event is instead of waiting. This cuts down on so much of the time wasting, and the game is so much more enjoyable because of that. Now, the side quests are actually fun!
Now the game is infinitely more replayable because I don't have to waste my time doing nothing. So yeah, I think I rambled like a madman about why Nerrel's video, which is every Majora 3D detractor's evidence on why the remake was so bad, is so terrible. It leaves out a lot of the good changes like the controls, aiming, new camera control, the song of double time, exaggerate some of the more questionable ones like the bombers running up to you or the stock pot in not looking dirty, or lies where he claims the 3DS version did nothing to improve the stone tower climb. The only good point he has is that the bosses and ice arrows didn't need to be changed. But you need more good points and can't just leave things out, exaggerate and lie in a review and comparison! So since the 3DS remake has better controls, aiming, cuts down on the waiting in the side quests, and made this game's so-called Water Temple better, you can't really call this a bad remake, when it changes a lot of the bad things about the original, and the things it does make worse aren't really all that bad. Well, I hope I explained why Majora 3D isn't a bad remake. I'll shut up now. Thanks for listening to me ramble like a madman. Comment if you think I'm right or wrong, why, and I'll see you in the next video.